Imagine waking up from a dream so vivid, so intense that for a moment you could not tell if it was real life or just a fleeting illusion. Now imagine being told that your waking life is also a dream, and that death is, in truth, the moment you finally awaken. This isn't just poetic philosophy. Across the teachings of the Buddha, the whispered wisdom of ancient mystics, and the testimonies of those who have crossed the veil and returned, one truth repeats like a sacred mantra. Death is not the end. It is the continuation of a deeper journey. And within that sacred continuation, your soul makes profound choices. Who your next parents will be, who your soulmates and companions are, what life mission you will embark upon. If you stay with me through this journey, you'll discover why nothing, absolutely nothing, in your life is random, and why your existence is far more heroic and beautiful than you have ever dared to believe. Now, let's lift the veil together. Let's see what your soul already knows. Chapter 1, Death is not an end, it is a new beginning. In Buddhist philosophy, death has never been seen as an end, a loss, or a tragedy. Instead, it's regarded as a necessary and beautiful transition, a return to the deeper currents of life that never truly stop flowing. The physical body, with all its vulnerabilities and strengths, is only a temporary garment. When we die, we simply step out of that garment, shedding it like an old robe and stepping into a vast, unseen ocean of existence. At the core of this understanding lies one fundamental truth: the continuum of consciousness never ceases. Consciousness, what you might call spirit, soul, or simply pure awareness, is not a product of the body. It does not die with the brain or end when the heart stops beating. Rather, consciousness is fundamental, original, and endless. It flows beneath everything, unseen but vital, like the deep undercurrents beneath a stormy ocean. Buddhism, especially through the Mahayana and Tibetan traditions, teaches that at the moment of death, the journey of consciousness unfolds in three great stages. 1. The disentangling, the release from physical and emotional attachment. 2. The reflection, a vivid, immersive review of the life just lived. 3. The planning, the conscious preparation for the next incarnation, the next set of karmic lessons. The grid is stunning, the disentangling, release from physical attachment. The first stage after death is not dramatic or sudden for the soul. It is a gradual letting go. For souls that were deeply rooted in materialism, in possessions, in power, in body image, in emotional entanglements, this process can be confusing, even painful at first. They may linger around familiar places, still emotionally clinging to homes, to people, to ambitions they were forced to abandon. In contrast, for more awakened souls, those who practice non-attachment, compassion, mindfulness, the disentangling happens like a feather slipping off a bird's back. There's a sense of weightlessness, freedom, and immense peace. I can personally relate to this idea. A few years ago, I had a near-death experience during a severe car accident. For a moment, just a heartbeat, I felt my awareness detach slightly from my body. I wasn't scared. I felt an overwhelming sense of peace, like I had slipped out of a heavy, clumsy costume. Everything around me, the sounds, the panic, the pain, faded. In that one moment, I understood what the ancient Buddhist masters meant by disentangling. It wasn't terrifying. It was natural, like water returning to the ocean. That experience fundamentally changed my relationship with death. It made me realize that the true fear is not of dying itself, but of the attachments we refuse to let go of. Buddhism teaches that the degree of suffering in this first phase depends almost entirely on our ability to let go, not just at death, but in every moment of life. The more attached we are to form, the harder it becomes to float freely into the next reality. The reflection, life review without judgment. Once the soul becomes disentangled, it enters the second stage, reflection. This stage is often misunderstood. In Western culture, we imagine a judgment day, a moment where we stand trial for our sins. But Buddhism presents a very different image. There is no angry judge, no harsh punishment. Instead, the soul gently and thoroughly reviews its entire life. But here's the extraordinary part. You don't just watch what you did, you feel it. Every smile you gave, you now receive. Every wound you inflicted, you now experience. It's not punishment, it's pure, vivid understanding. Imagine living your entire life again, but with the full emotional awareness of everyone you impacted, good and bad. The purpose is growth, not shame. It's about seeing the karmic web you wove and feeling inspired to weave more beautifully in your next life. I remember once hurting someone I loved deeply, not through violence, but through carelessness. For months afterward, I justified it to myself. But during a deep meditation retreat, something broke open inside me. I relived the moment, but through their eyes. I felt the pain I had caused, not as guilt, but as deep empathy. I realized, in a small way, what the life review must feel like, a profound reawakening of compassion. Buddhist teachings like the Tibetan Book of the Dead, Bardo Thodol, describe this stage in vivid imagery. The soul is shown visions, mirrors, and lights, not to punish, but to awaken awareness, to learn. The better you learn now, through mindfulness, through compassion, the gentler and clearer your reflection will be later. The planning, conscious preparation for the next life. Once the soul has seen and understood its previous journey, the final phase begins, planning. This is one of the most liberating and misunderstood aspects of death. You are not assigned a next life randomly. You are not thrown into existence without choice. Rather, you, along with your spiritual guides and bodhisattvas of compassion, choose the life that will best serve your evolution. You consider, what karmic debts remain unresolved? What virtues need cultivation? What challenges will ignite the next phase of your awakening? And yes, you choose even the hard things, difficult parents, illnesses, losses, poverty, challenges. Why would any soul choose hardship? Because comfort rarely awakens wisdom. Pain, when embraced with courage, can accelerate evolution in ways comfort never will. I see this clearly in my own life. I was born into a family that struggled with addiction, violence, and endless emotional storms. For years, I cursed my fate. I thought I was unlucky, abandoned by life itself. But through meditation, therapy, and Buddhist study, I began to glimpse the deeper picture. I chose this. On some mysterious, courageous level, my soul chose these obstacles to learn resilience, forgiveness, and unconditional love. And strangely, once I accepted this truth, everything changed. I no longer saw my past as a curse, but as a sacred training ground. This is the heart of the Buddhist view. We are not victims of fate. We are co-creators of destiny. Souls experience these stages differently. It's important to remember that not every soul experiences the disentangling reflection and planning the same way. The variance depends on the soul's level of awareness, the soul's accumulated karmic tendencies, the soul's ability to recognize the deeper nature of existence. An awakened soul, one that has practiced mindfulness, compassion, and detachment during life, moves through these stages with grace. They may pass through the bardo states, the intermediate stages after death, quickly, joyfully, even playfully. A soul heavily burdened by attachment, hatred, greed, or confusion may stumble through these stages. They may cling to the earth plane, wander in confusion, or resist moving forward. This is why Buddhist practice places such heavy emphasis on preparing for death while alive. Every act of mindfulness now is a preparation for your disentangling. Every act of compassion now is a preparation for your reflection. Every surrender of ego now is a preparation for your planning. Death is not a surprise to the practicing Buddhist. It is a transition for which one trains like an athlete prepares for a race, not in fear, but with joyful anticipation of the next great adventure. Final thoughts. Rabindranath Tagore once said, "Death is not the extinguishing of the light, but the putting out of the lamp because the dawn has come." When seen through the Buddhist lens, this quote captures the essence of what death really is. Not darkness, not oblivion, but a transition into something bigger, brighter, and infinitely more real. In truth, you have died many times before, and each time you have carried forward only what matters: the love you gave, the lessons you learned, the compassion you cultivated. Everything else, the wealth, the fame, the petty grudges, dissolved like mist in the morning sun. The sooner we realize this, the freer we become, not only at death, but in every precious, fleeting moment of life. Chapter 2. The Life Review. Seeing your true self in Buddhist teachings and many near-death experience accounts, there's a recurring and fascinating description of what happens after death, something called the Life Review. This isn't some dramatic courtroom drama where you're judged, condemned, or praised by some cosmic authority. It's something far more intimate, far more powerful. It's an experience of pure self-awareness, guided with immense compassion. Imagine sitting down in a quiet room with nothing but a full, panoramic, emotional playback of your life. Every decision, every word, every thought that shaped your journey, not just seen, but felt through the hearts of everyone you touched. That's what the Life Review is, and it changes everything. The Life Review is not judgment, it's understanding. The first thing we need to throw out is that the Life Review is about judgment, shame, or guilt. In Buddhist thinking, especially Mahayana Buddhism, blame and shame are seen as misunderstandings of reality. No truly awakened being would ever sit in front of you wagging their finger listing your sins. Instead, compassionate mentors, what Buddhism would call bodhisattvas, surround the soul, creating a sacred, safe space. In this space, the soul is invited to review its life, not to feel bad, but to learn deeply. Every kindness you offered isn't just acknowledged. It ripples outward in waves of light, touching countless lives you may never even have known. Every harsh word, every small betrayal or act of selfishness, you feel their effects too. Not as punishment, but as a chance to understand. It's like seeing the web of karma you wove strand by strand, action by action, with absolute clarity. And here's the real miracle. There is no blame, only loving awareness, only the burning desire to become even more luminous, more compassionate, more awake. How the Life Review actually feels. It's not like watching security footage or reading a dry report. It's experiential. You feel everything you caused, both joy and suffering, from the inside. When you made someone laugh on a hard day, you feel their laughter inside your own heart. When you broke someone's trust, you feel the sting of their betrayal, their loneliness, as if it were your own. It's immersive. It's not about thinking, it's about being. This direct experience burns away illusions. You can't lie to yourself anymore. You can't hide behind justifications, pride, shame, or denial. You see yourself exactly as you are, and you feel deep, overwhelming compassion for yourself and everyone else. This process isn't easy. It can be painful, but it is also profoundly beautiful. Why the Life Review matters so much in Buddhist terms. This moment is pure sati, full, undistracted awareness. It's what monks and practitioners train for their entire lives, to see reality as it truly is, free from the clouds of ego, fear, and delusion. The Life Review isn't something added after death. It's the natural unfolding of mind once the distractions of the body fall away. And the purpose isn't punishment. It's awakening. Through the Life Review, you gain insights you couldn't have accessed while you were alive, distracted by survival, ambition, relationships, pleasure, and pain. You finally understand where you lived aligned with love, where you deviated into fear, where you shined, where you closed yourself off. And with that understanding, you naturally yearn to do better, to choose wiser, to love deeper, to heal more completely. Real story, how I got a glimpse of my own Life Review. Several years ago, during a 10-day silent Vipassana meditation retreat, something unusual happened to me. It was the 5th night. The exhaustion, the silence, the endless scanning of body sensations had worn my mental defenses down. I remember sitting in meditation and suddenly scenes from my life started flooding in. Not just the big moments, graduations, breakups, losses, but the small, almost forgotten moments too. A time I laughed with a stranger on a bus. A sharp, thoughtless comment I made to a coworker. A hug I gave my grandmother before she died. But here's the strange part. I wasn't just remembering. I was inside the memory. I could feel what the other person felt because of me. When I made someone smile, I felt their heart open. When I wounded someone, even in small, careless ways, I felt the wound tear open inside me. I cried, not from guilt, but from overwhelming love, for them, for me, for all the mess and beauty of being human. That night gave me a small taste of what the life review must be, and it changed me forever. I realized how every single choice matters, how nothing, no act of kindness, no moment of impatience is ever insignificant. The ripple effect of actions. In Buddhism, the idea of interdependent origination, pratitya samutpada, teaches that nothing exists in isolation. Everything affects everything else. The life review shows this truth in real time. When you help someone, you don't just help them, you help everyone they touch afterward. Their lighter heart impacts their children, their friends, their community. And when you harm someone, that pain spreads too, unless it's consciously healed. Think about that. Every word, every action, every small kindness or cruelty echoes outward endlessly. During the life review, you experience those echoes. You see yourself not as a separate self moving through life, but as a node in a vast, intricate web of interconnection. And this realization isn't depressing, it's empowering. Because once you see how much impact you have, you realize how much good you can do, even in tiny ways, every single day. Why there's no condemnation, only compassion. It's crucial to understand the life review doesn't shame you. The beings who guide you, whether you see them as bodhisattvas, spiritual mentors, ancestors, or simply aspects of awakened mind, hold you in unconditional love. They don't scold, they don't punish. They simply help you see. The feeling isn't, I'm so terrible. It's more like, oh, I didn't know. I see now. I want to love better next time. The whole process is designed to liberate, not to imprison. This aligns perfectly with Buddhist teachings on karma. Karma isn't about cosmic punishment. It's about cause and effect, learning and evolving. The life review is a natural, compassionate unveiling of the karma you've set in motion, so you can understand, grow, and move forward in greater wisdom. What the life review prepares you for after the life review, you don't just drift randomly into your next life. With your new understanding, you help plan your next incarnation, choosing the family, environment, and challenges that will best serve your soul's growth. Setting new intentions, sometimes even choosing to meet certain souls again, to heal old wounds, to finish unfinished lessons. You carry the wisdom of the life review into your next birth, even if, once you're born, the memories fade. At some level, deep within your subconscious, the lessons stay. That's why some children seem wise beyond their years. It's why you sometimes feel drawn to certain people or causes with inexplicable intensity. It's why deep inside, so many of us have an unshakable sense that we're here for a reason. Because we are. Living today with the life review in mind. Once you understand the life review, your life can never be the same. You start asking yourself different questions. Will this choice expand love or shrink it? What ripple effect am I setting into motion today? If I were to review this moment from both sides later, would I feel proud? These aren't guilt-driven questions. They're soul-driven questions. They bring meaning and consciousness to even the smallest acts. Monks in Bhutan, one of the happiest nations on earth, meditate on their death daily. They practice Maranasati, mindfulness of death, to stay humble, awake, and compassionate. They know that one day soon they will face their life review, and they want it to be a moment of deep, radiant joy, not because they were perfect, but because they lived with courage, kindness, and awareness. You don't have to be a monk to do this. You just have to pause sometimes, breathe, reflect, act from love as often as you can. Chapter 3: How the Soul Chooses Its Next Life. After completing the life review, the soul stands at a pivotal threshold. It isn't pushed or dragged into its next incarnation by some cold mechanical force. It chooses freely, wisely, and with deep, sacred intention. Guided by the invisible but undeniable laws of karma, the soul surveys countless possibilities, not to find the easiest life, not the one with the least pain, but the one that will offer the most meaningful opportunity for growth. This is a truth that changes everything if you really absorb it. You chose your life. You chose your family, your culture, your body, your circumstances, your talents, and even your deepest struggles. The soul's thirst for growth, not comfort. The soul, at its essence, isn't interested in comfort. It doesn't come into human form to experience endless pleasure or safety. It comes to evolve, to expand, to awaken. And growth almost always comes through challenge. If you look at your own life, you'll probably find this to be true. It's not the easy, blissful times that shaped you most. It's the heartbreaks, the illnesses, the betrayals, the failures. These moments, painful as they are, crack open layers of illusion and ego, making space for something deeper to emerge. Compassion, resilience, humility, unconditional love. In my own life, I faced years of brutal self-doubt and insecurity, especially during my early 20s. I envied other people's confidence, their smooth paths, their shiny careers. For a long time, I thought life had just randomly dealt me a worse hand. But years later, after deep meditation retreats and soul searching, I understood. My soul chose those challenges. I needed to experience uncertainty and failure in order to find an inner confidence that wasn't based on external achievements. Without those struggles, I would have built my identity on sand instead of stone. The soul, in its higher wisdom, chooses the classroom it needs, not the one it necessarily wants in the moment. The criteria for choosing a new life. When selecting its next incarnation, the soul asks itself several profound questions. What karmic debts or imbalances still need resolution? Maybe it harmed others in subtle ways. Emotional manipulation, cruelty, selfishness, and now wishes to experience what it feels like to heal, nurture, and lift others up. What virtues need to be strengthened? Perhaps it developed wisdom but neglected love, or cultivated ambition but forgot humility. What toxic patterns need to be broken? It might have lived lifetimes trapped in cycles of fear, anger, addiction, or betrayal, and now seeks to break those chains once and for all. The soul isn't seeking punishment, it's seeking wholeness. Imagine a tree growing toward the sun. When a branch breaks or weakens, the tree doesn't give up. It grows around the wound, becoming stronger, deeper, and more beautiful. That's how your soul sees its evolution. Examples of conscious soul choices. Let's look at a few concrete examples to make this real. 1. Pride transformed into humility. A soul that lived many lifetimes intoxicated by power and pride might intentionally choose a life where it is born into humble circumstances. Maybe it comes as a child of working-class parents struggling for education and respect. Maybe it experiences repeated humiliation, not as punishment, but to break the addiction to superiority and reconnect with the beauty of equality. 2. Fear overcome by courage. A soul crippled by fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of loss, may design a life filled with situations demanding bravery. It might choose a path as a frontline activist, a social worker in a violent area, a single parent navigating countless unknowns. Each act of courage chips away at the soul's fear-based conditioning. 3. Neglect of love, healed by compassion. A soul that in past lives focused too much on intellectual pursuits or personal gain might opt for a life where love is unavoidable. Perhaps by becoming a caregiver for a disabled family member, a doctor in a crisis zone, or simply by being born into a family where empathy is a survival necessity. My personal story. My personal story. Choosing my hardest lessons. Looking back at my own life, I can clearly see how my soul chose growth over comfort. As a kid, I struggled intensely with abandonment wounds. My parents divorced when I was young. There were financial struggles, emotional instability, periods of feeling completely invisible. For a long time, I internalized those experiences as evidence that something was wrong with me. It wasn't until my 30s, during a long meditation retreat deep in the California mountains, that I had a breakthrough. During a particularly intense sit, a memory surfaced of myself as a soul before birth, choosing this life. I saw myself pure consciousness, knowing full well the loneliness, confusion, and hurt I would experience. And still, with fierce tenderness, I said yes, because it would teach me unconditional self-love, because it would teach me how to hold space for others' pain, because it would crack me open in all the right ways. The memory faded quickly, but its emotional truth stayed. And from that day forward, I stopped seeing myself as a victim of my childhood. I started seeing myself as a conscious participant in a larger story of awakening. And I realized nothing was random. Not the family I was born into, not the town I grew up in, not the challenges I faced. All of it was sacred. The role of karma. The role of karma in choosing our next life. It's impossible to talk about how souls choose their next life without talking about karma. In Buddhist teachings, karma isn't just about good and bad deeds. It's the natural law of cause and effect. Every thought, word, and action plants seeds that bear fruit, sometimes in this life, sometimes in the next. When a soul chooses its next life, it takes into account the karmic seeds it has sown, the lessons it still needs to learn, the balancing it needs to achieve. But karma is not some external judge forcing the soul into a particular life. The soul, in its wisdom, voluntarily embraces the consequences it has set in motion. It's like a student realizing they didn't fully understand algebra last semester, so they sign up to take it again, not out of punishment, but out of a desire to truly master it. The soul looks at its karmic portfolio and says, okay, I need more patience, more forgiveness, more courage. Let's create a life where I can build those muscles. What about random tragedies? A natural question arises. If we choose our lives, why would anyone choose to suffer violence, illness, poverty, or heartbreak? The answer is both humbling and awe-inspiring. Sometimes souls choose extreme hardships for accelerated growth. Sometimes they choose it to help others evolve. Sometimes both. A soul might volunteer to experience a terminal illness not because they deserve it, but because it will teach them and those around them compassion and presence in ways nothing else could. A soul might agree to be born into a war-torn country, knowing that their courage and resilience will inspire thousands. And some souls choose heavy loads to balance karmic debts from lifetimes where they caused harm, but always through the lens of growth, never revenge. Even great suffering is not meaningless. From the soul's perspective, it is a forge for greatness. Lessons from Master Atisha. The revered Buddhist teacher Atisha often spoke openly about his past lives. He described how he was reborn multiple times to heal specific flaws, pride, anger, attachment, that had clung to his consciousness across incarnations. In one life, he was an arrogant scholar who looked down on others. Realizing the damage that pride caused, he chose a future life where he would be born into a simple village family, experiencing humility firsthand. Atisha's example reminds us that spiritual progress isn't about denial. It's about conscious evolution, facing our shadows again and again if necessary, until all that remains is light. Nothing, absolutely nothing, is random. Once you internalize the truth that your soul chose its path, the way you see your life changes fundamentally. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And you start asking, what is this trying to teach me? You stop feeling cursed by your wounds. You start honoring them as sacred portals to deeper wisdom. You stop envying other people's seemingly easier lives. You start recognizing the heroism in your own journey. Every heartbreak, every loss, every battle with fear or loneliness or despair, none of it was a mistake. All of it is part of a sacred curriculum designed with love by you for you. Chapter 4: Soulmates, Spiritual Companions, and Sacred Contracts. Walking through a crowd, we pass hundreds or even thousands of people, most without a second thought. But once in a while, something different happens. Our heart jolts. We feel an unexplainable pull, a recognition, like meeting an old friend we somehow forgot. No logical reason, no clear memory, just a profound, silent certainty. I know you. From a Buddhist perspective, this is not random coincidence. This is soul recognition, the deep, ancient memory of connections that transcend lifetimes. Soulmates. The ones who crack you open. A soulmate is not, contrary to popular belief, someone who simply makes your life easier or more blissful. In fact, true soulmates often do the opposite. They challenge you. They break you open. They expose your wounds so that you can finally heal them. In Buddhist thought, soulmates are beings we have traveled with through countless cycles of rebirth. They know our deepest weaknesses, and they are willing to trigger them, not to hurt us, but to help us grow. A soulmate might be a passionate lover who forces you to confront your abandonment issues. A best friend whose loyalty teaches you how to trust again. A bitter rival whose betrayal cracks your ego and forces you toward humility. The Buddhist view is very clear. A soulmate is not someone who completes you, but someone who cracks you open so you can complete yourself. This is why many soulmate connections feel so intense, even turbulent. They are not here to fit neatly into our fantasies. They are here to wake us up. In my own life, I met someone in my late 20s who changed me completely, but not in the ways I expected. We were wildly drawn to each other, almost magnetically. At first, it felt like bliss, but soon all my deepest fears, fear of rejection, fear of inadequacy, fear of vulnerability, came flooding to the surface. It was excruciating. We fought, we cried, we triggered each other's darkest insecurities, and eventually we had to part ways. At the time, I thought it was a failure. But looking back now, with the wisdom of distance, I realize that relationship cracked me open in ways nothing else could have. It forced me to confront parts of myself I had hidden. It pushed me toward deeper healing. That was the gift. And that's the paradox of soulmates. They don't necessarily stay forever, but they leave fingerprints on your soul that shape you for lifetimes. Soul companions, the quiet, steady lights. Not every important soul connection is wild or dramatic. Some are gentle, steady, like the soft glow of a lantern on a dark path. Soul companions are the people who quietly walk alongside you, offering love, support, reflection, and encouragement. They might not create fireworks, but they create something far more valuable: stability, trust, and the safe space for transformation. A soul companion could be a lifelong best friend who knows you better than you know yourself, a mentor who believes in you when you have forgotten how, a coworker who teaches you patience through quiet collaboration, a sibling who holds up a mirror to your wounds without judgment. In Buddhist psychology, these companions are often seen as kalyana mittata, spiritual friends, people who walk the path with you, helping you stay centered and awake. I have a friend, let's call her Mia, who has been in my life for nearly 2 decades. There's never been drama between us, no intense romantic undertones, just a deep, steady friendship built on laughter, forgiveness, and growth. When I went through a severe depression in my early 30s, Mia was simply there, not trying to fix me, not judging me, just showing up, sending a text, dropping off food, sitting in silence when I had no words. Looking back, I realized Mia is a soul companion, a steady light. One of those quiet miracles we too often take for granted. In the grand scheme of spiritual evolution, these relationships are just as sacred, if not more, than the flashy soulmate fireworks. Spiritual contracts, agreements made before birth. Before incarnating, souls often form sacred contracts, agreements to meet, to help each other, to challenge each other, to heal each other. These contracts can involve joyful collaborations, difficult betrayals, heart-wrenching separations, unexpected reunions. The point isn't how long the connection lasts or how easy it feels. The point is how much growth it catalyzes. Spiritual contracts are crafted with incredible wisdom and immense courage, because when you agree to meet a soul and break their heart so they can awaken, you're taking on a heavy, sacred responsibility. Likewise, when you agree to love someone who may never fully love you back, you're agreeing to learn unconditional love, one of the hardest and most beautiful lessons. In ancient Buddhist texts, especially the Jataka tales, the Buddha recounts how he encountered the same souls again and again across countless lifetimes, as parents, as friends, as enemies, as strangers who offered one pivotal moment of help or harm. Each encounter was another step on the long, winding road toward enlightenment. There's a profound comfort in this view. Even the people who hurt us most are part of our evolution. Even our worst heartbreaks are woven into the larger tapestry of awakening. Recognizing soul contracts in real life. Sometimes, when you meet someone, there's an immediate sense of urgency, a feeling that this relationship matters. Maybe it's inexplicable ease, maybe it's intense friction, maybe it's an unshakable sense that you were meant to cross paths. These are often signs of a soul contract coming into activation. I experienced this once with a former coworker named Alex. From the first day we met, there was tension between us. Sharp, electric, sometimes antagonistic. We disagreed constantly. We pushed each other's buttons relentlessly. But over time, something strange happened. The friction became growth. Alex challenged my arrogance, forcing me to listen more deeply. I challenged his passivity, pushing him toward more courage. By the time we both moved on to new jobs, we had become something like reluctant allies, bonded not by agreement, but by mutual transformation. In hindsight, I see it clearly. We had a contract, not to be best friends, but to be mirrors, sharpening each other for the journeys ahead. Sir. How soul connections accelerate spiritual evolution, whether it's a soulmate cracking you open, a soul companion walking beside you, or a spiritual contract pushing you into uncomfortable growth. Soul connections exist for one reason: to accelerate awakening. Buddhism teaches that enlightenment isn't achieved in isolation. It's achieved through the messy, beautiful, painful business of relationship. We need each other to see ourselves clearly. We need each other to forgive, to grieve, to celebrate, to surrender. Each relationship, easy or hard, polishes the mirror of our awareness until we can finally see our true face: luminous, compassionate, free. The risk of misunderstanding soul connections. It's easy to romanticize soulmates, imagining that meeting one guarantees lifelong bliss. But true soul connections aren't always designed for permanence. Sometimes they're meant to burn brightly and then end, leaving you stronger and more awake. One of the biggest mistakes we make is clinging to relationships that have served their purpose, refusing to let go because we mistake spiritual contracts for lifetime guarantees. Part of spiritual maturity is learning to honor the connection without needing to possess it. Some people are meant to teach you a lesson and leave. Others are meant to stay and walk beside you. Wisdom is knowing the difference and blessing both paths with gratitude. Chapter 5: Why Your Soul Chose Your Parents and Family. One of the most liberating yet challenging truths in spiritual philosophy, especially within Buddhism, is that we choose the circumstances of our lives before we are born. And yes, that includes our parents. This is not an easy concept for everyone to accept. If you had a loving, supportive family, it may feel beautiful. But if you experience neglect, abuse, betrayal, or abandonment, the idea that you chose your parents can feel confusing, even infuriating at first. But this truth is not about blame or denial of pain. It's about understanding the soul's hunger for growth over comfort, awakening over ease. Your parents, in all their imperfections, provided the exact soil your soul needed to grow. Sometimes the soil is rich and nurturing. Sometimes it's dry, cracked, and thorny. But in either case, the lotus blooms out of the mud, not out of manicured gardens. The deeper spiritual purpose behind our families. In Buddhist psychology, life isn't random chaos. Everything arises from causes and conditions. Every experience, joyful or painful, serves the larger unfolding of awakening if we are willing to see it that way. When your soul chose your parents, it wasn't judging them by human standards. Whether they would be wealthy, whether they would love you perfectly, whether they would protect you from all harm. Instead, your soul chose based on what karmic lessons you needed. If you needed to learn resilience, you might choose parents who could not protect you from hardship. If you needed to learn compassion, you might choose parents who struggled with their own demons. If you needed to learn forgiveness, you might choose parents who would wound you. None of this erases the real valid pain you might have experienced, but it reframes it in a profoundly empowering way. You are not a victim of your family. You are a conscious participant in your soul's evolution. Why souls choose challenging families. There's a tendency to think, if I had a better family, I'd be a better person. But the truth is more complex. Easy circumstances rarely produce deep wisdom. They tend to produce complacency, entitlement, and attachment. Hard circumstances, on the other hand, when faced with courage and mindfulness, can produce compassion, strength, patience, forgiveness, fearlessness. I grew up in a home filled with emotional turbulence. My father struggled with alcoholism. My mother, burdened with endless financial and emotional pressures, often had very little left to give. For years, I carried resentment. I thought my life would have been so much better if I'd been born to different parents. But after years of spiritual practice, especially intensive Vipassana retreats and deep study of Buddhist teachings, my perspective shifted radically. I saw that every ounce of strength I have now, every drop of empathy, of resilience, of inner freedom, was forged in that very chaos. Without the pain, I would not have the depth. Without the struggle, I would not have the clarity. And most importantly, without those exact parents, with all their flaws, I would not be me. The lotus bloomed from the mud. Healing family karma. In many Buddhist and Eastern spiritual traditions, there's a belief in ancestral karma, patterns of suffering, ignorance, and pain that pass down through generations. Some souls come into families not just for their own growth, but to break toxic cycles that have persisted for centuries. Imagine a family line plagued by violence, addiction, betrayal. Generation after generation, the same wounds repeat. Then one soul comes in with a mission: to end the violence, to stop the addiction, to love consciously where others loved conditionally. That soul is a spiritual warrior. Their life is not easy. Often they face rejection, misunderstanding, isolation. They are blamed for breaking traditions or dishonoring family expectations. But in reality, they are fulfilling a sacred contract, healing not only themselves, but their entire ancestral line. Master Xing Yun, a revered modern Buddhist leader, often spoke about his own harsh childhood, poverty, hardship, abandonment. Instead of seeing it as punishment, he saw it as perfect training for patience, endurance, and compassion. He broke the cycle, not with anger, but with love. Each one of us has the same potential, no matter how heavy the family karma we inherited. Signs you came to heal family karma. If you feel different from your family, Not better, just fundamentally different. That's a sign. If you often find yourself questioning behaviors, values, or patterns your family treats as normal, that's a sign. If you feel called to forgive things others in your family refuse to forgive, that's a sign. If you've faced the temptation to perpetuate old cycles, addiction, violence, fear, and chosen otherwise, that's a sign. Healing family karma isn't about judging your ancestors or parents. It's about seeing them with clear eyes, honoring their struggles, and choosing differently. How choosing parents aligns with karma. From a Buddhist karmic view, your soul's choice of parents was also influenced by your own past life actions. You might have deep karmic bonds with your parents, needing to heal, repay, or complete lessons together. Shared unresolved patterns that needed another round of interaction to transform. Chosen parents who would mirror aspects of yourself you still needed to confront. Karma is not fatalistic. It's dynamic, living, and responsive to free will. Even if you chose challenging parents, how you respond now creates entirely new karmic seeds for yourself, for your family, for future generations. The choice to respond with bitterness or with compassion changes everything. My story. My story. Forgiving my father. When I was younger, I hated my father's drinking. I hated the way it made him volatile, unpredictable, sometimes cruel. Part of me vowed never to become like him. Another part carried silent rage for years. But during a meditation retreat about a decade ago, sitting with intense discomfort, something shifted. I saw vividly that my father was not his addiction. He was a wounded child in an adult body, carrying his own ancestral scars, repeating patterns he never had the tools to break. I saw too, like that my own soul had chosen him. Not because I deserved pain, but because I needed the lessons only he could teach me. Lessons about boundaries. Compassion without enablingness doesn't require forgetting. I wept for hours, not out of grief, but out of a profound, shattering compassion. And over time, that forgiveness transformed my relationship with him, even though he never changed. I didn't forgive to excuse him, I forgave to free myself. This is the deeper work of healing family karma. It's about releasing yourself from old chains, whether or not anyone else understands or joins you. Seeing your parents through the eyes of the soul. When you view your parents purely through human eyes, you see their mistakes, their limitations, their failures to meet your needs. But when you view them through the eyes of your soul, you see their own brokenness, their own desperate attempts to love in ways they knew how, their hidden wounds, their unconsciousness, born of suffering, not malice. You stop expecting them to be gods. You allow them to be wounded humans doing their best, just like you. And that's when real liberation begins. The lotus blooms from the mud. The Buddhist proverb says, "Out of the mud, the lotus blooms." The mud is not the enemy of the lotus. The mud is its necessary condition for blooming. Without the pressure, the darkness, the struggle to push upward, the lotus would never unfold its radiant petals. Likewise, your childhood wounds are not the enemy of your awakening. They are the necessary pressure that cracks open your compassion, your courage, your unconditional love. You are not broken because of your family. You are being born. Chapter 6. The environment, culture, and era you were born into. When we talk about the soul's journey, it's not just about who raised you or what body you received. It's also about where and when you were born. Your nation, your culture, and the specific era of history you live in were not accidents. They were deliberate choices made by your soul before incarnation. Every setting, no matter how seemingly random or chaotic, was chosen with precision for the lessons it would offer. In the eyes of the soul, there are no coincidences, only opportunities for awakening. Why your soul chose your environment. Environment isn't just background scenery. It profoundly shapes your development. It influences your values. It challenges your assumptions. It triggers your deepest wounds. It nurtures your highest potential. Your soul chose your environment because it offered specific challenges and unique opportunities to balance karma and cultivate virtues. If you were born into hardship or oppression, your soul came to develop resilience, courage, or compassion. Privilege or wealth, your soul came to learn responsibility, generosity, and humility. Times of political chaos or war, your soul came to be a force for peace, justice, or healing. Rapidly changing societies, your soul came to master adaptability, creativity, and openness. In every case, the environment isn't the obstacle to your soul's mission. It's part of the mission itself. Real story. Growing up between cultures, I was born in a small industrial town in the American Midwest, a place rooted deeply in traditional conservative values. Later, my family moved to a multicultural, progressive city on the East Coast when I was a teenager. For years, I hated the transition. I felt out of place, too backward for my new peers, too weird for my old friends. I didn't know how to fit in anywhere. At the time, I thought life had played a cruel trick on me, tearing me away from everything familiar, dropping me into a confusing new world. But as I matured spiritually, I realized something deeper was at play. My soul chose that contrast deliberately. Growing up between two radically different cultures taught me how to navigate different worldviews with empathy, how to question my own assumptions instead of clinging to them blindly, how to build bridges between divided groups. Without that painful, awkward culture shock, I would have stayed trapped inside a single narrow way of seeing the world. Now, my ability to relate to all kinds of people across politics, religion, race, and class is one of my greatest strengths. And it was forged precisely because my soul didn't choose an easy environment. Hardship as a spiritual assignment. If you were born into poverty, systemic racism, political instability, or chronic violence, you might understandably wonder, why would my soul choose this? The human mind screams for fairness. It wants ease, privilege, safety. But the soul plays a deeper game. In Buddhist philosophy, hardship is not seen as meaningless suffering. It's a catalyst for profound spiritual evolution. When a soul chooses a hard environment, it's often because it has the inner strength to endure and transform pain into wisdom. It seeks to awaken compassion, both within itself and in the wider world. It wants to accelerate karmic balancing by facing intense challenges head-on. Hard lives are not assigned to weaker souls. They are embraced by some of the bravest. Real-life example. Aung San Suu Kyi. One of the clearest examples of this principle is the life of Aung San Suu Kyi. Born into political chaos in Myanmar, her life was marked from the beginning by violence, instability, and repression. She could have easily chosen bitterness, cynicism, or quiet self-preservation. Instead, she chose a path of peaceful resistance, compassion, and moral courage. She spent nearly 15 years under house arrest, sacrificing her personal freedom for the dream of a freer, more compassionate society. In Buddhist terms, her choice to be born into that environment and to respond with love instead of hate represents the soul's highest calling, not to escape suffering, but to transform it. The era you were born into. Your soul didn't just choose your nation or culture, it chose your time in history. Think about it. You could have been born in the 12th century, the 1800s, the far future, but you were born now. In a time of unprecedented technological change, environmental crisis, global conflict, and spiritual awakening. Why? Because your soul knew that the challenges of this era would be the perfect forge for your growth. This era demands adaptability, courage, discernment, compassion, creativity. Your soul wanted to cultivate these traits, and this crazy, beautiful, heartbreaking world is the perfect classroom. My story. Living through historical upheaval during the COVID-19 pandemic, I struggled deeply. Isolation, fear, anger, and disillusionment washed over everything. I watched loved ones lose jobs, lose homes, even lose their lives. I questioned everything, my government, my community, even my own spiritual practices. There were days I wanted to curl up and opt out of life altogether. But sitting with those feelings, breathing through them in long hours of meditation, I kept coming back to one truth. I chose to be here for this, not to fix everything, not to save the world single-handedly, but to grow, to practice compassion under pressure, to stay awake when it would be easier to fall into despair or denial. This era, with all its madness and pain, is exactly the fire my soul needed, and maybe deep down yours too. Born into privilege, a different kind of test. It's tempting to think that being born into wealth or stability is simply good karma, a reward for good deeds in past lives. But Buddhist teachings remind us that privilege is a test just as real as hardship. If you were born into wealth, health, education, safety, your soul may have chosen this to learn how to use resources ethically, how to cultivate humility despite external advantages, how to serve others selflessly without superiority, how to resist the temptations of greed, arrogance, and spiritual laziness. In fact, from a karmic perspective, the misuse of privilege can create more suffering in future lives than the experience of hardship. Privilege is not a sign you're more advanced. It's a reminder you have greater responsibility. Every culture carries unique gifts and challenges. Different cultures carry different spiritual assignments. For example, collectivist cultures may nurture compassion and interconnectedness, but suppress individuality. Individualistic cultures may foster innovation and personal responsibility, but encourage isolation and egoism. Neither is better. Both offer rich fields for soul growth, depending on what lessons your soul needed most. If you were born into a collectivist culture, maybe your soul came to learn about community and sacrifice. If you were born into an individualistic culture, maybe your soul came to learn self-trust and authentic expression. Every cultural bias is both a gift and a blind spot. Part of your soul's task is to recognize both and transcend them. What about feeling out of place? If you often feel like you don't fit into your culture or your era, that's not a mistake. Many spiritual seekers experience a kind of existential homesickness, a sense of being foreigners even in their own land. This can mean a few things. You are here to bring in new values that your culture desperately needs. You carry karmic memories from different lands or eras that make this lifetime feel unfamiliar. You are being called to bridge worlds, to blend the best of multiple cultures, perspectives, and traditions. Feeling out of place doesn't mean you are broken. It means you are carrying seeds of transformation. Seeing your environment as sacred training ground. No matter where you were born, your environment is not an obstacle to your awakening. It's a training ground. Every injustice you witness is a call to compassion. Every ignorance you encounter is a call to wisdom. Every division you see is a call to unity. You don't have to change the whole world to fulfill your soul's mission. You just have to stay awake where you are. Recognize the culture, the country, the century you inhabit as your chosen dojo, your place of training. And remember, no lotus blooms without mud. No bodhisattva arises without a broken world to heal. Chapter 7, Free Will and Spiritual Planning. One of the most important and often confusing questions in spiritual philosophy is this: if my soul planned my life before birth, do I still have free will? The answer, especially in Buddhist thought, is clear and profound. Yes, you have free will, not just as a technicality, but as a central tool in your soul's journey. Imagine your soul's plan as a beautifully detailed map. There are rivers and mountains. There are many paths, some easier, some harder. There are key crossroads where choices have extra significance. But how you move across that map, which turns you take, how fast you go, whether you climb the mountain or turn back, that's entirely in your hands. There is destiny, and there is choice. Both coexist without contradiction. The map versus the journey. Your soul's pre-birth plan is like a set of potentials, not a rigid script. It might include certain people you are destined to meet, certain challenges designed to awaken specific virtues, certain talents seeded into you at birth, but how you respond to those opportunities is left open. The Buddhist concept of anatta, the doctrine of no fixed self, implies this clearly. You are not a static entity bound by fate. You are a dynamic being, capable of change in every breath, in every thought. There is no destiny beyond choice. Each breath is a new beginning. Each time you choose love over fear, courage over despair, presence over distraction, you move closer to the highest version of the life you were meant to live. Each time you choose otherwise, you don't get punished. You simply create new lessons for yourself. The soul is infinitely patient. The universe is infinitely forgiving. How free will works within spiritual planning. When designing a life plan, your soul knows. You will forget the plan. You will get distracted by pleasure and pain. You will sometimes resist the very lessons you chose. That's not a mistake. It's part of the design. The beauty of free will is that it makes every act of awakening authentic. If you had no choice but to evolve, it wouldn't be true growth. It would be programming. True growth requires confusion, struggle, resistance, surrender, conscious choice. The soul doesn't judge you for how long it takes. It simply offers opportunity after opportunity, like a patient teacher offering unlimited retakes on a difficult exam. Personal story. Resisting and rediscovering my path. In my mid-20s, I felt completely lost. I had finished college, bounced between uninspiring jobs, and watched my dreams fade into the background noise of survival. I knew, deep inside, that I was meant to do work that mattered, that healed, that awakened people. But fear kept me stuck. Fear of failure. Fear of ridicule. Fear of financial instability. So I took safe jobs, hid my creative gifts, silenced the voice inside me calling for more. Years passed, and the more I resisted my soul's calling, the more miserable I became. Until one morning, sitting alone in a tiny apartment, I finally broke. I realized that comfort was killing me faster than risk ever could. It wasn't that my soul had abandoned me. It was that I had abandoned my soul. In that moment of surrender, crying, terrified but honest for the first time in years, I felt something shift. I didn't suddenly know exactly what to do, but I knew one thing. I could choose again. That day, I started making small, scary choices aligned with my deeper calling. Writing honestly, studying Buddhism seriously, sharing my voice even when it shook. And slowly the path unfolded, not because destiny forced it, but because free will realigned me with my soul's deeper plan. Accelerating or delaying growth. Free will gives you the ability to accelerate your evolution or delay it when you respond to life's challenges with openness, courage, compassion, mindfulness. You move quickly along the path your soul mapped out when you respond with resistance, bitterness, fear, avoidance. You create detours, not punishments, but additional lessons. From the soul's perspective, no path is wrong. Some are just longer and rougher than others. It's like traveling across a mountain range. You can hike the direct trail with effort and focus, or you can wander into side valleys, get lost for a while, take the scenic and painful route. Either way, the soul knows you will reach the summit eventually. There is no wasted time. There are only different kinds of learning. Can you miss your destiny? A lot of people are haunted by the fear that they will somehow miss their destiny, that by making the wrong choices, they'll ruin everything. In truth, your destiny is fluid. It adjusts to your choices in real time. Think of your soul's plan as a GPS system. If you miss a turn, it recalculates. If you take a wrong road, it finds a new route. If you stop moving altogether, it waits patiently. You can delay your arrival, you can make the trip harder, but you can't erase your destination. Your soul will keep whispering directions. The universe will keep sending signs and synchronicities. And even when you stubbornly refuse to listen, life itself becomes the teacher through suffering, through longing, through repeated patterns that beg for your attention. Nothing is lost. Destiny is a co-creation, not a dictation. One of the most empowering truths is this: destiny is not something imposed on you. Destiny is something you co-create with the universe. The map was drawn in love. The journey is walked in freedom. Your soul laid out the invitations. You choose which ones to accept and when and how. No one, not even the highest spiritual beings, can force your hand. You are sovereign. You are responsible. You are powerful. Every choice you make, even the smallest one, ripples outward, opening new doors, closing old ones, creating new timelines. You are not a passive passenger in your life. You are the driver. Personal story. Choosing courage over fear. A few years after I started realigning with my soul's calling, I was offered a speaking engagement at a meditation retreat. The idea terrified me. Speaking publicly, sharing vulnerable truths, risking judgment, everything in me wanted to say no, play it safe, stay invisible. But during meditation, a deep, clear intuition arose. This is a door your soul placed on your path. Walk through it. I accepted. The night before the event, I barely slept. The morning of, my hands shook so badly I could barely hold the microphone. But I spoke anyway. Raw, imperfect, real. Afterwards, several people approached me in tears, saying that my honesty had given them permission to start facing their own fears. In that moment, I realized something profound. When you choose courage over fear, you don't just fulfill your own destiny. You help others fulfill theirs too. Free will isn't just about your own evolution. It's about creating ripple effects that awaken everyone you touch. Compassionate recalibration. In Buddhism, there is no idea of a wrathful God punishing you for wrong choices. There's only compassionate recalibration. When you make choices out of fear, ignorance, or ego, the universe doesn't get angry. It gently adjusts the path, offering new lessons tailored to your new starting point. Life keeps teaching, keeps inviting, life keeps opening doors. No matter how far you stray, your soul's love for you never wavers. The GPS keeps whispering, turn around, come home. Chapter 8, Spiritual Guides. You are never alone. From the very first moment your soul chose this incarnation, spiritual guides were assigned to you. Not as judges, not as rulers, but as quiet companions, walking invisibly beside you, dedicated to your growth and your protection. They whisper through intuition. They arrange synchronicities that nudge you toward the right path. They shield you from dangers you aren't meant to face, stepping in only when absolutely necessary, because respecting your free will is sacred. Even if you don't consciously perceive them, their presence is real. You have never taken a step alone. In Buddhist thought, especially in the Mahayana and Vajrayana traditions, there are countless bodhisattvas, awakened beings who postpone their own final liberation in order to assist all sentient beings on the path to enlightenment. Spiritual guides can be seen as personal bodhisattvas assigned to each soul. Some may be ancestors. Some may be non-human beings of pure light. Some may even be aspects of your own higher consciousness. They exist beyond the limits of form and time. They don't intervene to fix your life or shield you from all pain. They work subtly, always nudging, never forcing. Their main goal is simple but profound: to help you remember who you really are. How spiritual guides communicate: because guides operate in higher vibrational fields, they rarely communicate in obvious physical ways. Instead, their guidance is subtle, working through intuition, sudden flashes of insight that feel different from normal thought, synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that feel too perfect to be random, dreams, symbolic visions that offer clarity or reassurance, physical sensations, chills, warmth, tingling when thinking about certain choices. Other people, guides sometimes nudge others to deliver a message or opportunity you need. Their communication is not loud or forceful. It's like a soft knock at the door of your awareness. You can ignore it, or you can tune in and listen. The more you trust and engage with their presence, the stronger the connection becomes. My personal story, meeting my guides through a dream. About 6 years ago, I went through one of the darkest periods of my life. A major relationship ended. My financial situation collapsed. I felt utterly abandoned by life, adrift, hopeless, alone. One night, after hours of crying, I finally collapsed into restless sleep. And I had a dream unlike any other I had ever experienced. I was standing on a narrow cliff, the ocean raging below. I was frozen with fear, unsure whether to move forward or turn back. Suddenly, a figure appeared beside me, cloaked in white, face hidden, radiating immense calm. Without speaking, they pointed toward a thin, almost invisible bridge stretching across the chasm. The message wasn't verbal. It was a pure transmission into my heart. Trust. Step forward. You will not fall. I woke up sobbing, but not from fear, from overwhelming relief, from the deep, undeniable sense that I was not alone. The next few weeks were still hard, but every time fear rose up, I remembered the dream. I remembered the guide's unwavering presence, and slowly, step by shaky step, I rebuilt my life. Looking back, I realized that guide was always with me. The crisis didn't summon them. It simply made me quiet enough to hear them. Spiritual protection without interference. Many people wonder, if I have guides, why do bad things still happen to me? It's a valid question. Here's the answer. Your guides are sworn to respect your free will. They don't interfere with lessons your soul has consciously chosen to experience. They don't remove every obstacle, because obstacles are often the most potent catalysts for growth. However, when dangers arise that exceed your karmic necessity, accidents that would derail your life before you complete important lessons, they step in quietly. You might experience near misses, sudden gut feelings that prevent disasters, unexpected delays that avert accidents. Many spiritual teachers recount moments where they narrowly avoided catastrophe for reasons they can't logically explain. In Buddhist lore, monks often pray daily to bodhisattvas like Avalokiteshvara for protection, not from all suffering, but from premature death or distractions that would cut their practice short. Protection, in the spiritual sense, isn't about wrapping you in bubble wrap. It's about keeping you aligned with your soul's highest trajectory as long as you are willing. Avalokiteshvara. The archetype of compassionate guidance. In the Buddhist tradition, Avalokiteshvara, known in China as Guanyin and in Japan as Kannon, is the embodiment of infinite compassion. Many Buddhist masters recount dreams or visions where Avalokiteshvara appeared during their darkest moments, whispering encouragement, this pointing toward the next step, filling their hearts with renewed courage and clarity. Avalokiteshvara is not just an external deity. In a deeper sense, she represents the inner dimension of awakened compassion that lives within each of us and within our guides. The guidance we receive is not imposed from outside. It arises naturally from the deep interconnection of all beings. Real-life signs of spiritual guidance. Sometimes the presence of your guides is almost palpable. Here are some real-world signs you may recognize. You think of someone you miss, and they call you within minutes. You narrowly avoid a serious accident because of a last-minute delay. A book falls off a shelf open to exactly the passage you needed to read. You dream vividly of a loved one or a wise figure offering you reassurance. You feel an unexplainable warmth or pressure on your shoulder during meditation or grief. These are not random. They are signatures of presence, whispers of reassurance. The universe, through your guides, is in constant, compassionate conversation with you. Strengthening your connection with your guides. Although your guides are always present, your ability to perceive them depends largely on your willingness to listen, your ability to quiet your mind, your openness to trust subtle signs. Simple practices to deepen the connection include daily silent meditation. Even 5 to 10 minutes a day helps quiet the mind's chatter. Asking for guidance before sleep. Pose a clear question and trust that dreams or intuitions will respond. Keeping a synchronicity journal. Recording coincidences sharpens your awareness of patterns. Practicing gratitude. Even if you don't consciously perceive guidance, thank your guides daily for their unseen help. Just like any relationship, the more attention you give, the stronger the bond becomes. You have more help than you realize. Most people live as if they are struggling alone against a vast, indifferent universe. Nothing could be further from the truth. You are surrounded by layers of loving support. Guides, ancestors, bodhisattvas, aspects of your own higher mind. They are all cheering for you, protecting you, whispering to you. Even and especially when you feel most alone, their presence is closest. The spiritual path can feel lonely because it requires facing yourself with radical honesty. But you are never truly alone. Every step you take toward love, wisdom, and truth is met with invisible hands lifting you higher. Personal story, a final message at the edge. Years ago, during another painful breakup, I was walking alone through a forest, heartbroken, questioning everything. I stopped by a massive oak tree and, without really thinking, placed my hand on its trunk. And suddenly, I felt it, a warm, pulsing presence that flooded my chest with peace. Not words exactly, more like a knowing. You are held. Keep going. Tears poured down my face, but they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of remembering. In that moment, I knew. I was never alone, not in love, not in loss, not even in my darkest moments. And neither are you. Chapter 9, Karma, the Law of Compassionate Balance. Karma is one of the most misunderstood spiritual principles, not just in the West, but sometimes even among those who walk Buddhist paths. Forget the old images of karma as some cruel cosmic punishment, a tally sheet where the universe waits to strike you down for every mistake. In authentic Buddhist teaching, karma simply means cause-effect, action, result, nothing more. Nothing less. It's not personal. It's not emotional. It's a natural law, as simple and consistent as gravity. Every thought you think, every word you speak, every action you take, these are seeds planted into the fabric of existence. Some seeds bloom into suffering. Some seeds bloom into freedom and joy. But all seeds bear fruit eventually. This is not judgment. This is balance. The universe does not punish. The universe teaches how karma actually works. Imagine throwing a stone into a pond. The ripples move outward in all directions, touching the shorelines, disturbing the still water, setting off tiny waves that continue far beyond where you first tossed the stone. Karma works the same way. Every intention you release, whether from love, anger, fear, compassion, sends ripples outward into the world and into your own future experience. It's important to understand. Karma begins with intention. The motive behind your action matters as much as, and often more than, the action itself. If you give money to charity out of guilt or pride, the karmic imprint is different than giving out of genuine compassion. Karma is subtle. It measures not just what you do, but why you do it. Seeds of suffering, seeds of liberation. Buddhist teachings often use the metaphor of seeds when describing karma. Every thought, word, or deed plants a seed. Seeds born of greed, hatred, or delusion will eventually ripen into suffering. Seeds born of generosity, love, patience, and wisdom will eventually ripen into joy, clarity, and liberation. It's not immediate. It's not mechanical. Some seeds sprout quickly, some take years, decades, or even lifetimes, but nothing is ever lost. The garden of your life, your health, your relationships, your fortunes, your inner peace, is not random. It's the flowering of seeds you planted, consciously or unconsciously. Personal story. When karma came full circle in my early 20s, I wasn't the most mindful person. I was often sharp-tongued, impatient, dismissive of others' struggles if they didn't match my own. I didn't think of myself as cruel, just blunt and honest. But those small seeds of disregard were still being planted. Years later, when I faced my own deep emotional struggles, anxiety, heartbreak, failure, I found myself surrounded by people who didn't seem to understand me. They were kind on the surface, but distant, impatient, unable to hold space for my pain. At first, I felt victimized. Why is nobody showing up for me? But sitting with it, especially during long, brutal, silent meditation retreats, the truth surfaced. I had sown those seeds years earlier, not maliciously, not intentionally, but the seeds had been planted nonetheless. Experiencing the emotional isolation I had once unwittingly inflicted on others was not the universe punishing me. It was the universe teaching me. With that realization came a massive shift. I stopped resenting. I started owning. I began planting different seeds, seeds of deep listening, compassion, patience. Slowly, painfully, beautifully, the garden of my life began to change. Karma is not fate. One of the most dangerous misunderstandings about karma is the belief that it locks you into a rigid destiny, that if you suffer, it's because you deserve it and there's nothing you can do. Nothing could be further from the truth. Karma isn't a prison sentence. It's a living, breathing system of choice and consequence. Every moment you are planting new seeds. Every thought, every breath is a chance to change the future. It doesn't matter what seeds you planted yesterday, or 10 years ago, or 10 lifetimes ago. What matters is, what seeds are you planting now? What intentions are you setting into motion today? The future isn't written in stone. It's being woven strand by strand in every present moment. Why hard lessons are not cruelty? Sometimes people ask, if karma is compassionate, why do I have to experience so much pain? Because pain, when met with awareness, teaches things that pleasure cannot. When everything goes smoothly, we rarely stop to examine our minds, our attachments, our false beliefs. When life falls apart, we are forced painfully, urgently to look deeper. What am I clinging to? What am I ignoring? What have I misunderstood about myself or others? Painful karma is not cruel. It's a wake-up call. It's life saying, look here, grow here. Free yourself here. Karma and collective patterns. Karma doesn't only operate at the individual level. Families, communities, nations, and even civilizations generate collective karma. If you are born into a country racked by violence, inequality, or corruption, you're interacting with the collective karma of that land. Your soul didn't land there by accident. You may be called to heal old wounds, challenge unjust systems, bring compassion where cruelty reigns, rebuild where destruction has occurred. Collective karma offers massive opportunities for growth, but it can also be heavy, tangled, and slow to shift. This is why spiritual practice isn't just about personal peace. It's about helping shift the collective patterns toward greater awareness and balance. How to create good karma every day. Karma is not about heroic acts. It's about small, consistent choices made with mindfulness and compassion. Simple ways to plant seeds of liberation. Speak truthfully, but with kindness. Practice patience when frustration arises. Offer help without expecting recognition. Forgive, even when your ego wants revenge. Bless others silently throughout the day. Respond to your own suffering with gentleness rather than self-criticism. Every small act matters. The universe is always listening, not in judgment, but in perfect reflection. Small seeds, big flowers. A few years ago, I started a tiny, simple practice. Every time I walked past a stranger, I silently wished them well. Nothing elaborate, just a thought. May you be happy. May you be free from suffering. At first, it felt silly, like throwing pebbles into the Grand Canyon. But over time, something strange happened. I started noticing more unexpected kindness from strangers, more peaceful interactions in tense situations, more lightness inside my own heart. It wasn't magic, it was karma, small seeds blooming into unexpected joy. Now, when people ask me how to change their lives, I often tell them, start with the smallest kindness. The garden will take care of itself. It wasn't like Lurkono. As you sow, so shall you reap. The Dhammapada, one of the most revered Buddhist scriptures, puts it simply, as you sow, so shall you reap. This isn't a warning, it's a gentle truth. It's an invitation. You are not helpless, you are a gardener. Plant seeds of patience and patience will grow. Plant seeds of generosity and abundance will bloom. Plant seeds of compassion and suffering, yours and others will begin to heal. You can't control the weather. Storms will come, floods will come, but the seeds you plant determine life that emerges after the storms pass. You are always creating, always influencing the tapestry of existence. Even now, even here. Chapter 10. The Purpose Behind Pain. Spiritual warriors. Some souls don't come into this world looking for ease. They don't ask for a soft, sheltered life. Instead, they choose, with full awareness, lives filled with intense difficulty. Why? Because they are ready. Ready to grow faster, ready to heal deeper karmic wounds, ready to serve humanity's collective evolution through personal transformation. The soul knows that nothing shapes consciousness more profoundly than walking through fire. Why? And surviving with the heart still open. Severe illnesses, disabilities, wars, devastating losses, these are not random cruelties. In many cases, they are courageous choices made at the highest levels of the soul's wisdom. Why souls choose hard lives. In Buddhist understanding, suffering is not something that happens to us. It is something that happens for us when embraced consciously. Hardships crack the shell of ego. They tear apart false identities. They bring us face to face with impermanence, compassion, resilience, and ultimate truth. A soul that has already accumulated significant wisdom may choose an extraordinarily challenging life to accelerate awakening, balance intense karmic imprints, awaken compassion in others through their example, help heal collective wounds in society or humanity at large. In short, these souls are spiritual warriors, not because they never fall, but because they rise again and again, carrying more light each time. Pain as a catalyst for awakening. Pain, when resisted, can destroy. But pain, when embraced with mindfulness and compassion, becomes a gateway. In Buddhist practice, suffering is often described as a teacher. Dukkha, suffering, dissatisfaction, is one of the core marks of existence. It is the pressure that pushes beings toward enlightenment. Without it, there would be no motivation to seek liberation. The Buddha himself taught that seeing the reality of suffering clearly, without denial, bitterness, or despair, is the first noble truth, the beginning of wisdom. Thus, a life filled with hardship is not wasted. It is rich soil ready for spiritual flowering. My personal story, walking through darkness. In my late 20s, I went through a prolonged period of chronic illness. At first, it started as minor health issues, fatigue, joint pain, mysterious digestive problems. But over a few years, it escalated to the point where I could barely function. Doctors gave vague diagnoses. Friends grew tired of hearing about it. I lost relationships, opportunities, dreams I had cherished for years. For a long time, I was angry. Angry at my body, angry at God, angry at the unfairness of it all. But somewhere, deep in meditation, especially during long, silent retreats, another voice began to whisper through the noise. This is not happening to you. It's happening for you. I began to see the illness differently. It forced me to slow down and truly listen to my body and mind. It humbled me in ways success never could. It broke open reserves of compassion I didn't know I had for myself and for others in pain. Without that suffering, I would have remained trapped in arrogance, ambition, spiritual immaturity. Was it easy? Absolutely not. But was it sacred? Without a doubt. The Buddha's own journey through pain. The story of the Buddha is itself a profound example of choosing the path of hardship consciously. Born into luxury and privilege, Prince Siddhartha could have lived a life of endless comfort, shielded from the realities of suffering. But when he encountered sickness, old age, and death, something awoke in him, a deep, burning need to understand the nature of suffering and transcend it. He left everything, his wealth, his family, his title, and he walked into hardship voluntarily, enduring homelessness, facing hunger and thirst, battling fear, doubt, temptation. Through that fire, he achieved enlightenment, not just for himself, but for all beings. The Buddha's life teaches that great awakenings require great courage. Pain is not the enemy of liberation. It is often the doorway, everywhere. Spiritual warriors among us. You don't have to be a monk or a sage to be a spiritual warrior. Spiritual warriors are everywhere. Y'all, a single mother working 3 jobs but still finding time to teach her children kindness. A refugee rebuilding life from ashes, refusing to surrender to hatred. A cancer patient offering comfort to fellow patients even in the face of their own mortality. These are not victims. These are warriors. Their battles are invisible to most. Their victories are silent, measured not in worldly achievements, but in the quiet expansion of compassion and wisdom. In Buddhist understanding, merit, the invisible spiritual currency of good deeds and resilience, shines brightest from those who suffer consciously with open hearts. How pain shapes the soul's evolution. Every experience of suffering leaves a mark. Some scars harden the heart, some scars open it. The difference lies in how we meet the pain. When we meet suffering with bitterness, blame, resistance, we deepen samsara, the endless cycle of dissatisfaction and rebirth. When we meet suffering with curiosity, mindfulness, compassion, we break samsara's chains, thread by thread. This is why some of the most radiant souls you will ever meet are not those who had the easiest lives, but those who transformed hardship into wisdom. Personal story. Choosing compassion over bitterness. After years of battling illness, there came a moment when I faced a choice. Stay bitter, blaming the world, my body, fate, or soften, embracing the vulnerability, the limitations, the uncertainty. It wasn't a grand decision made once. It was 1,000 tiny choices made daily. Choosing to meditate even when exhausted, choosing to speak kindly to myself when I failed, choosing to offer understanding to others even when I felt empty. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the bitterness began to dissolve. I didn't beat the illness in the traditional sense, but I learned to live with it, through it, and beyond it, with a heart more open than I ever thought possible. Pain didn't ruin me. It remade me. Pain and the awakening of compassion. One of the greatest gifts of suffering when embraced is the awakening of true compassion. Not pity, not condescension. Compassion rooted in deep, lived understanding. When you've suffered, you no longer see others' pain as distant or theoretical. You feel it as your own. You respond not from obligation, but from resonance. This is why many great healers, teachers, and spiritual leaders have walked through immense suffering. Their compassion is not academic. It is carved into their bones. They do not just know suffering. They are suffering transformed. The bigger picture, serving collective evolution. Sometimes souls choose hard lives not just for personal growth, but for collective healing. They carry burdens that awaken empathy in others. They model resilience that inspires whole communities. They break generational cycles of violence, fear, and ignorance. In Buddhist cosmology, bodhisattvas, beings who vow to awaken not just for their own sake, but for all beings, sometimes choose to reincarnate into the most broken, painful places, precisely because that is where light is needed most. You may not remember making that vow, but your life struggles hint at a deeper purpose. You are not just suffering for yourself, you are helping shift the consciousness of the entire world. Chapter 11. Finding Your Purpose, the quiet call of your soul. Purpose isn't something you create out of thin air. It isn't a prize you win for being good enough. It isn't a title, a career, or a shiny achievement to show off. Your soul's purpose is something you already carry, quietly, stubbornly, lovingly, deep inside. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It doesn't demand, it invites. Purpose reveals itself through your deepest longings, your old, half-forgotten dreams, the pains that haunt you for reasons you can't explain, the talents that feel effortless, flowing through you like breath. You are not here by accident. You are here on a mission that only you can fulfill in exactly the way you can. How purpose speaks through longing. Longing isn't just sentimentality, it's a sacred clue. That aching in your chest when you imagine a different life, a freer, fuller, more loving life, isn't foolishness, it's your soul calling you home. Buddhist teachings often remind us that desire isn't the enemy when it's properly understood. Craving that arises from ignorance creates suffering. But noble longing, the desire for truth, meaning, connection, points us toward awakening. When you feel drawn to, create beauty, ease suffering, speak truth, build bridges. That's not random, that's purpose whispering. The key is to discern what kind of longing burns inside you. The longing to possess or the longing to serve. The latter is the compass. How old dreams hold sacred clues. Think back to your childhood, before the world told you who to be, before fear crept in. What did you dream about? Maybe you wanted to be an artist, a healer, an explorer, a teacher. Maybe you didn't have words for it, just a feeling of wonder, of this is who I am. Those old dreams aren't childish fantasies. They are encrypted messages from your soul, written in a language so simple that adults often forget how to read it. Even if the exact dream has shifted, the essence remains. For me, as a child, I was obsessed with stories. I wrote endlessly. Poems, tales, journal entries, even pretend books I stapled together by hand. I didn't know what it meant at the time. Later, when life's pressures pushed me into practical career paths, I stopped writing. I told myself it was childish. I buried that part of me. But no matter how much I tried to ignore it, the ache remained. And when I finally returned to writing, not for approval, but for the joy of it, my life began to realign. The old dream was the map all along. How pain points to your purpose. Sometimes it's not your dreams, but your wounds that reveal your purpose. The pains that refuse to leave you alone, the injustices that inflame you, the losses that hollow you out, the hurts that shape you. These are not just personal tragedies, they are callings. The Buddhist concept of dukkha, suffering, isn't just about recognizing pain. It's about understanding how pain can be transmuted into compassion. If you've experienced abandonment, you may be called to be a bridge builder in broken communities. If you've survived illness, you may be called to heal others, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. If you've known crushing loneliness, you may be called to create spaces of belonging. Pain is sacred when it's met with awareness. Your deepest wounds can become your deepest offerings. How effortless talents are invitations. Pay attention to what feels effortless, not easy, effortless. There's a difference. Effortless is when time disappears, flow takes over. You feel more like yourself, not less. It might be speaking, teaching, creating, listening deeply, organizing chaos into clarity. These are not accidents, they are hints, gentle arrows pointing toward the work your soul came here to do. When you move in alignment with these natural gifts, life doesn't become free of struggle, but the struggle feels worth it, sacred, even joyful. The Buddhist idea of right livelihood speaks to this, choosing work that nourishes life, that uplifts rather than exploits, that expresses your inner truth. My story. Losing and rediscovering my purpose. For years, I worked jobs that paid the bills but starved my soul. I was good at them, project management, marketing, consulting. But every morning I woke up with a hollow ache. It wasn't about laziness or ingratitude, it was about disconnection. The work didn't flow from my soul's deep current. It felt like wearing someone else's skin. Eventually, through a slow, painful process of burnout, breakdown, and brutal honesty, I realized I wasn't broken because I hated those jobs. I was being called back to my true work, the work of writing, teaching, creating spaces for healing and transformation. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't instantly lucrative, but it was real. And every step I took toward it, every terrifying, thrilling step, felt like coming home. Trust the signs, listen to the whispers. Your soul is always communicating, always pointing, always inviting through coincidences, dreams, deep emotional responses, quiet longings, unexpected opportunities. But the messages are often subtle. If you're waiting for a booming voice from the sky, you'll miss it. Instead, you have to trust your body's wisdom. Trust the resonance you feel when something is right. Trust the gentle pulling sensation towards certain people, places, projects. Sometimes your mind will argue, it's impractical, it's too late, it's too risky. But your soul whispers, come this way. The whisper is rarely urgent. It's patient, it waits as long as it needs to. But the more you listen, the louder it grows. Purpose is about service, not self-glorification. Another crucial truth, your soul's purpose is not about personal glory. It's not about fame, fortune, or validation. It's about service, not in the sense of martyrdom, not in the sense of erasing yourself, but in the sense of offering your gifts in a way that uplifts others, healing their wounds, igniting their courage, reflecting their worth, awakening their dormant hope. When you align with your soul's true work, the question changes from what can I get to what can I give? And ironically, in giving, you find the greatest fulfillment. As the Buddha taught, your work is to discover your work, and then, with all your heart, give yourself to it. The courage to answer the call. Following your soul's purpose requires, enormous courage, because it often means disappointing others' expectations, risking failure, facing inner demons, walking into the unknown. It requires trusting something invisible, intangible, immeasurable. It asks you to become a beginner again and again. But here's the secret. Every act of courage, no matter how small, strengthens the bridge between you and your soul. Every step you take in faith, the path lights up a little more. You don't have to see the whole map. You just have to take the next right step. Final reflection. The quiet call never leaves. Even if you ignore it, even if you delay it, even if you take detours that last years or lifetimes, the quiet call of your soul remains. It waits, it whispers, it sings softly in the background of your daily noise. And when you are ready, when you finally say yes, it rushes in like a river, carrying you into the life you were always meant to live. Final reflection. You are exactly where you are meant to be. Take a breath. Feel your heart beating. Let yourself remember something that the world constantly tries to make you forget. You are exactly where you need to be. Not one step behind, not one step ahead. Right here, right now. Perfectly placed for the next great unfolding of your soul's light. Even the chaos, even the mistakes, even the heartbreaks that cracked you wide open, especially those, They are part of the architecture of your becoming. Nothing in your journey has been wasted. It's so easy to look back and feel regret. The jobs you didn't take, the relationships that ended badly, the years you wasted in confusion, addiction, fear, or numbness. But from the soul's perspective, nothing was wasted. Every stumble taught you something about balance. Every heartbreak taught you something about love. Every dead end taught you something about discernment. You didn't lose time, you gathered wisdom. The scars you carry are not shameful. They are sacred inscriptions of growth. They show you kept moving even when it hurt. They show you tried even when you were terrified. And they will be the markings that guide others who come after you. Your struggles were part of the plan. Struggle is not evidence of failure. Struggle is the friction that polishes the soul. Buddhist teachings are very clear on this. The path to awakening is not about escaping suffering. It's about transforming suffering into compassion, clarity, and strength. In the Dhammapada, it says, by oneself is evil done, by oneself is one made pure. Purity isn't something you find in a sterile, untouched life. It's something you carve out breath by breath through engagement, heartbreak, loss, resilience. You earn your wisdom. You earn your kindness. There's no shortcut. And the fact that you are still here, still breathing, still searching, still growing, that's proof that you are succeeding, even when you feel broken. My story, feeling behind and finding out I wasn't in my early 30s, I hit a wall. Everyone around me seemed to have it together. Stable careers, marriages, children, mortgage payments, and I was drifting. Freelance work, failed relationships, dreams that felt too heavy to carry anymore. I judged myself harshly. You're behind. You missed your window. You're never going to catch up. It was suffocating. But during a month-long meditation retreat, something inside me began to shift. Sitting on the cushion for hours a day, the mind's chatter eventually quieted. And beneath all the fear, all the self-criticism, there was something else. Peace. A deep knowing that I wasn't behind at all. I was exactly where my soul needed me to be. Learning patience, learning self-trust, learning how to love myself without achievements. None of the external markers mattered. The real work was happening invisibly, inside. And when I surrendered to that truth, the strangest thing happened. My outer life started to realign too. New opportunities appeared. New relationships formed. New energy blossomed, not because I fought harder, but because I finally stopped fighting myself. Trust the timing of your life. There's a profound humility in realizing you cannot force your soul's timing. You can try, you can push, demand, hustle, manipulate, but real growth happens at its own pace. Like a flower opening petal by petal, like a river carving a canyon, slow, powerful, unstoppable. Trust that the seeds you planted will bloom at the perfect time. The lessons you need will appear when you are truly ready to absorb them. The people you are meant to meet will cross your path when your energies align. In Buddhist thought, dependent origination teaches us that everything arises from the right conditions. Your role is not to panic about timing. Your role is to cultivate the conditions. Presence, courage, patience, love. Everything else follows naturally. And when you feel lost, you're closer than you think. Some of the most powerful turning points in spiritual journeys happen when you feel utterly lost. Why? Because being lost forces you to question your assumptions, let go of old identities, drop the illusions that kept you trapped. The illusions that kept you trapped, it cracks you open in a way comfort never could. In Zen Buddhism, there's a beautiful idea: not knowing is most intimate. When you admit you don't know who you are, where you're going, how it's going to work out, you come into direct, raw contact with life itself. You are naked before the mystery. And in that humility and that openness, something new can be born. You're not failing when you're lost. You're preparing for rebirth. Your dreams still matter, even if they seem foolish, even if years have passed, even if you no longer believe you're capable. Your dreams are not naive. They are sacred. They are the language your soul uses to remind you who you are. Buddha said, your work is to discover your work, and then, with all your heart, give yourself to it. It doesn't matter if you are 20 or 70. It doesn't matter if you are broke, tired, discouraged. If the dream still calls to you, however faintly, it's because it's alive. And if it's alive, it's not too late. Begin again. Personal story. Dream delayed, not denied. When I was a teenager, I dreamed of traveling the world, learning languages, writing books, sharing stories across cultures. But life had other ideas: family obligations, financial struggles, unexpected health challenges. By my early 30s, I told myself that dream had died. But quietly it hadn't. It had gone underground, like a seed sleeping through a long winter. And when the conditions were right, when I was ready to trust again, the dream stirred. Small at first: a short writing assignment for an international journal, a scholarship to attend a meditation retreat overseas, a chance meeting with a translator who opened new doors. Step by step, almost imperceptibly, the old dream reawakened. And today I live part of that dream, not in the flashy, Instagram-worthy way I once imagined, but in a deeper, truer way. It took longer than I wanted, but it happened exactly when I was ready to honor it properly. Dreams don't die, they wait for you to grow into them. You are not broken, you are becoming. In a culture obsessed with fixing ourselves, it's revolutionary to realize you are not broken. Even when you feel shattered, even when you feel like a mess, even when your life looks nothing like you thought it would, you are not broken. You are becoming. Like a butterfly dissolving inside a cocoon, chaos is not death, it's transformation. When the caterpillar melts, it doesn't fail at being a caterpillar. It is being prepared for a whole new form of existence. Your soul's journey is the same. Trust the process, even when it makes no sense, even when it hurts like hell, especially then. You are guided, even when you can't see it. Every step you've taken, even the detours, even the disasters, has been held within a larger field of love and wisdom. You may not see the guidance, you may not hear the whispers, but they are there, in the gut feelings that kept you safe, in the sudden kindness of strangers, in the words of a book you picked up by accident, in the dreams that shook you awake at 3 a.m. You have been led. You are being led still. You are not walking blind. You are walking bravely through the fog, trusting that light lies ahead. And it does.